Hey y'all, here's a fun fact. Do you know that Viggo Mortensen actually broke his toe when he kicked that helmet? No, wait, that's the wrong fact. Here's the fact. The average US citizen takes just about 20 photos every single day. But wait, there's more. On social media, worldwide that is, users share over 14 billion images every day. Man, that's a lot of photos. We invented photography, us humans, that is, just about 200 years ago. But, like so many other things, the industry has changed quite a lot over the past few decades. Because of new technologies, and that's what we're going to be talking about. The new normal is to capture our lives with our phones. But even though it's normal to us now, I think it's interesting to think about just 20 years ago. Back when we didn't have them, we didn't take pictures of everything we saw that we wanted to take a picture of. So, since we're basically all photographers now, I think it's important to think about how we interact with photos. Because, it plays such a big role in our lives today. And why this habit might be changing more than just our memories. We were sold an idea. To understand how the industry is affecting us, let's take a look at why we take photos in the first place, shall we? And to see if it's actually doing the thing that we want it to do. If you ask people, most of them will say that they take photos to remember their lives. There's been surveys done on that. So let's start there, that photos help us remember stuff. The idea actually comes from the company Kodak. Remember that company? Which built its entire brand on the fact that pictures can preserve memories forever. In their early ad campaigns, for example, all the way back in 1920, in your grandma's. Wait, how old are you? Well, they said that there's only one perfect memory. The Kodaks. That's pretty good, honestly. And later, their ads claimed that snapshots remember when you forget. What this did is Kodak made it seem like taking a photo was the key to overcoming your forgetfulness. This carefully constructed advertising seems to have stuck with us. But was Kodak right though? Well, the science is mixed. Some research suggests that taking a photo makes us pay less attention to the experience in itself because we're offloading the job of remembering onto the camera, the device or phone or whatever. Something called cognitive offloading. It's kind of like making a shopping list so you don't have to remember what's missing. It's really easy for us, but we don't let our brains do the work in that case. Then on the other hand, there's also studies that conclude the opposite. So it's mixed. It's a mixed bag in the science world. And it seems like the effect of photography on memory, if any, appears to be quite small. However, when science fails us, we can always look at philosophy. The philosopher Susan Sontag wrote a pretty seminal book on photography back in 1977. It's literally called On Photography. Now, if I mention Sontag here, I do need to go over her opinion on consumer photography, which is what most of us do with our phones. And warning, she wasn't a huge fan. In her time, Western tourism was just taking off, and if there's one thing we know about tourists is that they like to take pictures. Sontag believed that when they go on holiday, they do so just so they can bring back proof that they'd gone through pictures. And to her, this stood out as kind of a mechanism to shield themselves from a real experience. So to her, it was like trading presents for proof. And to a certain extent, I agree with her. And especially when I go to a concert or a historic site or something like that, where a lot of people, they don't seem to be able to be there. They just want to record it. I think if Sontag were alive now, she'd probably have a lot more to say and she'd probably die all over. Okay. Probably shouldn't say that. But she did have more to say on other stuff about how photography affects us in a broader way in terms of how we look at images and how they inform us about the world and reality and all those fun things. She said that, quote, "Photographs alter our notions of what is worth looking at and what we have the right to observe." Whoa, that's a deep one. So what she's saying here is that photos are kind of like a grammar and ethics of seeing the world. Photos inform us about reality if we're not really there, right? That's really interesting when we're talking about memory, actually, I think. Because all these photos that we now have stored in our phones, Well, to Sontag, she'd probably say that they're informing us about what's worth remembering, what's worth capturing, and even what we have the right to observe. And more to that point, Sontag even argued that photos don't just document reality. They help define it and establish what we should value in society. In other words, she thought that by constantly curating our lives through images, well, we're subtly shaping our understanding of what moments matter, and probably more importantly, which moments don't. But again, it's nuanced, it's not all bad, and she discussed a lot of good examples of photography. So before I shit more on photography, let's take a good one, shall we? So, in 1950, just around 9% of Americans owned a TV, but 16 years later, in 1966, 93% owned one. So, in just those years, suddenly most of America was watching TV. The Vietnam War was the first big conflict to be broadcast into people's homes. It was actually often referred to as the television war, exactly because the American people were able to see what was going on right there on the battlefield from their living rooms, basically. Every single night, too. Images of war shown on TV like this definitely help shape people's opinions and emotions also towards the atrocities of the war that was going on. And it, in turn, might have made them take action or mobilize against it. So by bringing these distant realities going on in Vietnam into the living rooms of American homes, photos and videos, televised images, whatever, gave people what Sontag called the right to observe. A window, kind of, into the harsh realities that we might not have been able to see without photos and videos. But again, this was in the 1970s, and the way that we engage with photos and videos now has completely changed, and it's basically everywhere around us. There is something to say about a lot of conflicts being documented on smartphones, and that we're able to get a first-hand glimpse into the atrocities going on in the Middle East, for example. But for a lot of us, it's a habit to take photos now and to look at photos. And it's probably a habit that's been born from this carefully constructed advertising that we've seen throughout our lives from Kodak and later Google and Apple and all those big companies. So here's a bleak example. Think of all the people, mostly younger people, who communicate through apps like Snapchat. On Snapchat, users send pictures back and forth, sometimes of nothing in particular, just to maintain a snap streak, which is a count of how many consecutive days two people have exchanged pictures. This is a weird gamification of communication, if you ask me. And it's kind of turned photography into this social currency almost, but at the expense of genuine, spontaneous human interaction. But, what do I know? I'm just a picture on your screen. Do you value genuine, spontaneous? And of course, since I'm interested in tech, I gotta mention AI here too. Because with the latest phones, AI isn't just some buzzword either that we hear all the time. It's actually built into our camera apps. Those features that make every shot look incredible, like with the lighting and colors, it all looks good without even trying, right? Smoothes out imperfections, makes the colors pop. Or like it erases people now, like random people walking in the background of your photo. Those are all algorithms in play, so-called AI algorithms, making your photos look way better, but also not real. Although these features seem amazing, with every single upgrade our camera gets, we're tempted to take even more photos too. After all, why wouldn't we? Our phones practically guarantee that every shot will look amazing now. But let's just take a moment and think about why these features exist in the first place. The tech companies behind this sort of AI stuff, Apple, Google, I'm guessing they know that by giving us the tools to take perfect photos pretty effortlessly now, we'll be more inclined to use their cameras, and as a byproduct or extension, their services too. It's quite a clever strategy if you think about it. The more photos we take, the more we need more storage, so we'll use their cloud services and buy space there too. Back when Kodak started advertising, they sold us the idea that taking photos were the key to, remembering our lives. But now companies in the industry, they're also selling us the idea that our lives can and should look perfect, which is fake now because AI, right? Like the pictures we see aren't informing us about something that's really going on. And the big tech companies, they're providing the tools to make it happen. So what does that say about Sontag's grammar and ethics of seeing. A little bit. Well, I feel like there's so many of these doctored and fake photos out there nowadays that photography is doing an even worse job than it used to at depicting and framing reality in a realistic way. And more to that point, just knowing an AI photo is AI or fake doesn't necessarily prevent it from impacting our memory. And studies have shown this, that even when we know that we're looking at a fake photo, it still affects our memory of that specific event. Okay, sorry. Let's try not to get fully down on smartphones, because honestly, they're great products. I mean, in and of themselves, it's become super easy to document your life if you want that, and to kind of organize all the photos, like all of those collages you get from like different points in your life. That's a great product, honestly, and I use that all the time. And also, you don't necessarily have to use their magic AI functions, right? You can just use the phone as a classical camera. Okay, good. We got the positive stuff out of the way. Can't be too positive in these videos, you know. Speaking of shitty things again, here's where things start to get a little bit scary, in my opinion. In her book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, the scholar Shoshana Zuboff explains that today, our human experiences, our thoughts, our actions, and yeah, even the photos that we take, well, they've become raw materials for a new economic system that feeds on our data. Boom, that sounds very conspiratorial, but let me explain and unpack it here. Basically, what Zuboff is talking about is how big tech companies like Google and Apple, they're telling us that, hey, your phone might crash and burn soon. Right? That happens to people, right? So you could lose all your photos, but don't worry, we have the solution. You can just upload your photos to the cloud and we'll keep them all safely stored in a big server somewhere. Just as a side note, have you ever thought about what would happen if those servers crashed and burned? That stores all of our data? Anyway, what these big companies aren't telling us, Google and Apple that is that they're using our photos as behavioral data points, basically to turn a profit by predicting what we'll do next, because when they can predict what we do next, they can sell us the best advertising, micro-target us. Think about Google Photos as an example. It's a service that stores our images for free. Sure, that sounds great. On the surface, it's a simple exchange. You know, convenience for storage. But behind the scenes, Google is analyzing all of these images to understand our habits, our preferences, and even our relationships. And they do this so they can predict our behavior and modify it through advertising, you know, again, to sell us stuff. But oh boy, it actually gets worse. There are companies that scrape billions and billions of photos from online databases to build massive facial recognition databases. Their own databases. And there have been some cases where these databases have been hacked by bad actors. That sucks. That happened actually with the company Clearview AI back in 2020. And even if these databases aren't hacked, if we take Clearview as an example, their database was actually used by law enforcement agencies without our knowledge or consent, basically. Now, this can be a good thing if you're fighting crime against the baddies, but if you're not a baddie and you think you're a goodie, and wait, basically critics argue that law enforcement's use of Clearview AI's technology puts everyone into a perpetual police lineup. Suddenly, these personal moments that you've been taking with your phone don't seem so personal anymore. Your photos have actually become a little part of a huge machine that knows more about you than you probably realize. And you signed the terms, so are you stupid? Okay. First of all, photography might help us remember things that we wouldn't otherwise have remembered. But as the philosophical standpoint shows, it might come at the cost of being more or less present. I mean, not more present. That would be OP. Although maybe if you're already mindful of this, you could be deliberate with photography and still be present in the moments that you value. You know, that's for you to decide. I don't want to say that you're an ungrateful piece of... No, I really don't want to say that, actually. That has nothing to do with anything. What is, however, clear is that we might be misremembering our lives because of the new technologies, the AI technologies that are changing our images on a daily basis. And then we walk away after everything's said and done with a distorted understanding of reality. And probably more importantly is that when we take our pictures and upload them like everyone does now because your phone is linked to the cloud, it isn't just about conserving your life anymore in memories. With this surveillance capitalism that Zuboff talks about, it's become like your photos have become commodified by big tech companies in ways that we did sign up for but didn't know we were signing up for. And it's really hard to break free from the surveillance of the cloud. Our life is deeply entrenched in it now, and I think it's actually unrealistic to think that we can just tap out of that. But with that said, I think it is good and important to be aware of the fact that our data, it's not just our photos, by the way, everything we do online is used as data for behavioral modification. But with that being said, I think it is useful to be aware of the fact that big companies are using your data like this. For example, for when you vote in elections, like, okay, this may be a bit late for that. But are the politicians you're voting for talking about data privacy and regulating big technology companies? Because that's really important, and it's only getting more and more important as technology keeps advancing at a very rapid pace. Or maybe you should just get an analog camera and not feed the stupid cloud machine and not take 20 photos a day, because with an analog camera, that's pretty expensive. Maybe I should get an analog camera. And maybe you should check out my Patreon, where you can find version 1 of this video where I talk more about photography in particular, and that I took off YouTube because I didn't like it. But it's still on my Patreon because I gotta have content there. And hey, check out that sweet like button. It feels great to press it, I've heard. I don't know. And if you want to keep watching, here's a video where I talk more about the dangers of AI images and journalism, more specifically. And warning, it's way more serious and it's scripted, more than this one. So be warned.